Welcome to the Book Party Podcast. Join us as we journey into the world of books with Michael T. Prepare to be captivated by engaging interviews, insightful discussions, and fascinating stories. You'll discover new adventures and gain insight into the creative process of the authors themselves as they share their struggles and accomplishments. Now let's hear from Michael T.
This is Michael T. Thank you for being with us this morning. To all our listeners, I would invite you to go to the bookpartypodcast.com. That's bookpartypodcast.com. Hit that subscribe tab on top. Then you can scroll down to the icon of your choice, where you can find us on one of your favorite platforms, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or Audacity. You can download and follow us there. Please don't hesitate and forget to sign up for our newsletter to get the latest information on our upcoming shows. Today, I would like to introduce our guest, Silvano Stagni, and his book, The Dressmaker's Parcels. Silvano Stagni is a multilingual cosmopolitan character who enjoyed a varied life. He started writing during his previous professional life as an expert in implementing financial regulations. In his youth, he listened to people telling their stories. Now it's his turn to be a storyteller. Silvano, why don't you take it from here, listen, and fill in the blanks a bit and tell us, listeners, about yourself.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I had a life in the city. I tried to write when I was young, but my family told me that I had to get a serious job. So I did. After too many years in the city, and in the city as a profession, I mean in banking, because I've lived in many countries, I decided it was time to start writing. And I started with a story that is that I feel very passionate about. I've grown up. I have very interesting parents coming from very interesting families, and that set me out in life very well. And I don't mean financially, with the framework to cope with things, including a minor disability and any sort of things that life throws at you. And whatever throws at you, you keep going. And in a way, the book I wrote is a way to honor my parents.
Okay. So, Silvano, are you a self-publishing author, or did you collaborate with some others to help with your editing and your any other parts of the book that you needed some help with?
I did the research. Well, I started from stories I heard, but of course I had to turn a bunch of anecdotes into a story. I did quite a lot of research to fill the blanks. I wrote the book myself. I had an editor give me a manuscript assessment because there were things I wasn't sure, the way I divided the book and so forth and so on. And I had a graphic designer turn a photograph I loved into the cover of the book. But I did the formatting myself. I just wanted to learn, and I did everything else other than those two things.
Oh, so you did the formatting yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Did you upload this like a KDP upload, or how did you do that? Or did you use an agency to go through?
No. I uploaded it on KDP and on Ingmar Sparks. There was a deliberate choice because the book is also available on other venues other than Amazon, and I sort of thought that a bookshop would not
Oh,
order a
okay.
book from Amazon.
Fantastic. Okay, so when you were writing this book, now is this the only actual book you've done so far?
It is the second I've published. The first one was a collection of short stories, but that was just to see how the process was. What I had to do to format the
Understood.
book and things like that. I have 3 other books at various stage of development.
So this is the first actual book that you published.
Yes. Yeah.
So you get to say to your friends and other people, you get to say, "I am published," right?
Yes. And I
I
was
am a
almost
published man.
And I was almost tempted to print the screenshot of the Amazon page of my book and frame it when it came out.
Okay, all right, all right.
I didn't do that, but I was really tempted to do it.
But it is kind of a neat feeling to be able to say, "I'm published." I mean, that is really a good feeling to do that. Okay, so in writing your book, in writing your book, take us to a point that you would consider your worst author moment and tell us that story.
Oh, I think it was the second or the third draft where I started reading about writing and all sorts of things that they tell you to do. And I wondered whether I wrote a story or just a bunch of words that were rambling. And probably that was the turning point into being an actual writer. The beginning of me developing, let's say, a method, although I'm scared of that word. Because before the book, I wrote financial articles and white papers and things like that, but there was a clear structure, a clear audience. That the book I wrote to tell, not I wrote to sell. It's a story that I feel very passionate about. And therefore, I was beginning to wonder if anybody would actually ever be willing to read it, other than, my children, because I'm talking about their grandmother. Not because they're nice to me, just because I was talking about their grandmother. And that was probably the lowest point. And I have to thank an online writer group called the London Writers Salon that took me through that, where various people took me through that very low point and allow me to start thinking of writing as a craft.
I think a lot of people, and most actually, go through that sort of thought process. You're not alone. Trust me, you are not alone. So, also in your writing of this book, I call this one, let's get rid of that whole thought process we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
I call this one the epiphany moment. Take us to a point in time, doesn't matter what you were doing at all. You could have been driving, you could have been getting ready to go to bed, you could have been in the bath or the shower. All of a sudden, a light bulb goes off in your head, and it's a moment, it's like, wow, oh man, I got to get a pen, I got to get a paper, I got to write this down. The epiphany moment. Tell us about that. You had to have one.
Oh, no, yeah, no, I actually had more than one, but one that I think the first one in particular was when I realized that I had a way out of something that everybody was telling me was not going to work.
Okay.
I had I'd done things in a chronological way. So the story spans from 1936 to 1945. And of course, you start at the beginning. But I forget what people were telling me. I realized I was writing this, that the
So this
juicy
is the
stuff.
war years.
Yes. I'm talking about a Venetian Jewish family through Italian racial laws that were different from Nazi Germany. The arrival of the Holocaust in Italy, which happened late in 1943, and a period that was very intense and chaotic for Italy in general, because the last year and a half of World War II were actually a civil war in Italy, with one side, broadly speaking, to simplify matters, south of the front line, you had the Kingdom of Italy and the Allies, and north of the front line, you had the Republic of Italy and Nazi Germany. And that's when the interesting stuff starts. Not the bit before, but I had to write about the bit before to show the transformation of the life of this Jewish family, and why the characters ended up making the choice they did. And I was actually talking to one of my children, and when I realized that, yes, I know how I can start. I know the starting point, and then I have a flashback, and then I continue. And the starting point was a really interesting story in itself, which could have been almost a book of its own, but I used it as a starting point. And that was, yes, I can actually do this.
Well, now that you've said the time frame this was up and through 1945, so we obviously were talking about the war years. Are we talking about the dressmaker's parcels being some type of signaling?
No, it was parcels. The parcels were a code, because Emma, i.e. my mother, used to take people. We used to be part of a group of people in the regions that were taking down there men, escape prisoner of war, we would call them dissident now, but anti-fascist that need to go to cross the line.
Okay, well, signaling
line
was a bad choice of words for me, but a code is a better choice. I think I know where you're going with that. That's kind of what I was alluding to.
The people she was taking from A to B were her parcels. She would refer to them, not just she, everybody referred to them as her parcels.
So now, is this based on nonfiction then?
It is 50%.
Or a mixture?
It's a mixture. It's a dramatized version of tales I've been told. Some actually pretty late in life. In other words, pretty recently.
Okay, so it's based in nonfiction, but it's dramatized so that it's based on nonfiction but dramatized.
When you write, a story has a beginning, a middle, and the end. When they tell you things, nobody sat me down to tell me a story. I had anecdotes. And of course, there were, if you put them together, of course, you have holes in the middle.
Right,
and
understood.
I filled hole in the middle.
I get it. No, that's fantastic. I think that's great. I think that's actually going to be a fantastic story you've put together. I think that's something to read. Okay, let me ask this question.
Mm-hmm.
What is the one thing you are most fired up about, something you're excited about now, today? Besides saying, I'm published, because we already said that.
No, but I wasn't about to say that. It's, if I have to pick one, I started following that book to talk about Jews in fascist Italy. And I think it's a great metaphor of some of the things that are going on today, because people are labeled. Whatever movement, whatever your opinion, whatever your position, left, right, center, up, down, the middle, diagonal, whatever, you're labeled. And the problem with labels is that you lose the person behind it.
Correct.
And they dehumanize that. And labels are for bottles. And the example of fascist racial laws, as in Mussolini rather than Hitler, was that they were a sort like, when you go in the shower and you keep increasing the temperature, if you do it slow enough, you get used to it. But it doesn't mean that when you get to a point where it scalds you, it doesn't mean that you don't get hurt. You just don't notice it until it's too late.
Right.
And I think we are at a point where we're all about to be like, or cooking frogs that you throw them the pot alive and those things. We are at the point where it becomes very easy to forget about the humans behind them, behind whatever bubble you talk about, because we are all in a bubble, and the bubble is what other people identify us.
Right, understood.
And that's something that I feel very passionately about.
All right, I understand. And you know what? I'm right there with you. Again, this is Michael T., and I thank you for being with us this morning. To all our listeners, I would invite you to go to the bookpartypodcast.com. That is bookpartypodcast.com. Hit that subscribe tab on top, then scroll down to the icon of your choice, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and Odyssey, where you can find us on one of your favorite platforms, where you can download and follow us there. And please don't forget to sign up for our newsletter to get the latest information on one of our upcoming shows. Now, we're entering the lightning round. So I've got 4 pointed questions for 4 pointed answers. So, number 1, what was holding you back besides being in the city? Can't use that excuse. What was holding you back from becoming an author in the first place?
Probably the thought that I couldn't do it, or the fact that my family was pushing me towards an actual job.
Your family was not what? I'm sorry?
Was pushing me towards an actual job. Do a serious job. Writing is not a serious job.
But again, back to the first one, that you couldn't do it?
I learned that I could actually tell a story when I had to write about financial regulation, and I had to do it in a way that was clear, and financial regulation are not always clear. So I turned them into a story. And somebody told me that I was actually quite good at telling stories.
Right.
And that's what changed.
So, well, you moved from the city to the country. Is that what you did?
I moved. Well, I still live in London, but I live by the river.
Ah, well, that's much better anyway. You don't want to be living downtown London. I'm telling you, yeah, I've only been there a couple of times, and not my choice of Heathrow was one of them. Anyway.
Okay. It gets better after Heathrow. Whatever you are.
Heathrow wasn't a good experience for me. The first time I was there, just a bunch of soldiers standing around with machine guns, And I was in the military at the time, and the security was extremely tight. Okay, What was
Yeah.
the best advice? Now we're talking about in the time that you were writing, that period. What was the best advice you had ever received?
Just write.
Huh? Just right?
Just write. Write is a muscle. You need to exercise the muscle.
There you go. Yeah, just right. Okay. Share one of your personal habits that contributes to your success.
I like to get to the point. I like to research things, and I research them to death.
Yeah, because in the occupation you were in, you're very analytical, attention to detail, right?
Yeah.
And in writing, you were probably over analytical, attention to detail. And if you get too far into that, you'll analyze it to death instead of keep going with the writing part of it.
I was told one of the feedback I had of the book is that I was getting into too many details, but it's tough.
That's okay. All right. Now you're of age, and as am I, that when we were younger, say in our 20s and even 30s, there were no computers, there were no cell phones. We didn't have those things.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't have internet resources and such, but we do now. So in your writing, can you share for our listeners at least one internet resource that you would use for your writing?
May I mention two? Because one is Readsy, which is a website that has a lot of good advice for writers. And the other one, is Wikipedia, but I need to clarify what I do with Wikipedia. Wikipedia is not a great source of details, but is a great source to point to the things you actually need to research.
Yeah, Wikipedia gets changed up too much by anybody that wants to change it.
Yes.
But sometimes for ideas, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. I like The Rocket and the Spy. Anyway, The Rocket and the Spy. Okay, here's what we're going to do next, Silvano. This is time for the grand finale.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want you to do is share with our listeners a way that they can maybe connect with you if they want to follow you or get a hold of you to ask a question, find your book. We already know you did a KDP upload to Amazon. Is there a blog? Is there a website? Whatever. And, of course, just talk about your book.
Okay.
You got all the time you need.
Yeah, the website is something I'll start tomorrow. Unfortunately, tomorrow hasn't metamorphosed into today yet, but I'll start tomorrow. At some point, I'll restart it. I have a blog, which, with a lot of creativity, I've called Author Silvano, and it's authorsilvano.substack.com. I have a number of author pages, and I think in GoodReads you can actually ask me questions. Or you can read my blog, make a comment, and ask me something. I'm also on Facebook as me, so I don't have, again, this is me being lazy, I don't have a second author profile. It's all me. And I'm even on Twitter. Not that I tweet that much.
Right. Well, this is all on our introduction section.
Yes.
Here anyway of the broadcast for you, so they can read this stuff if they get it right.
Okay. As far as the book, I said I'm very passionate about the book, and I wrote to tell rather than writing to sell, because I wanted to tell the stories of Jews who fought back. The Holocaust is full. What we read about the Holocaust, the trope is Jews that were either hiding to save their lives or going to the chamber. In reality, for instance, at least in Italy, a lot of Jews fought in the resistance. And although my mother and my grandmother and the character inspired by them didn't actually shoot, although my mother knew how to shoot, they were active in the resistance. And it's the story of an actually fairly well-off family that led a really happy life. An interesting family, because my grandmother was a lawyer, and in the 1920s and 1930s, there weren't that many women married with 5 children who were also professionals. And that's not just in Italy, I think, anywhere in the so-called First World. And it's a story of how this family reacts to being discriminated against, and then decides to do something about it. And it's a book that shows that you can fight back, and people who actually fought back. That's why I'm very passionate about it.
I like the whole sound of your book. I'm telling you, I'm gonna be needing to read this one, because it's a time frame, a period in time that I really fancy to read about. Trust me, I really fancy that time period.
There's also another thing that I forgot to mention. The end of the book is how a family rebuilds their lives after the war. The book ends 7 months, after the end of the war, at the end of 1945. The war ended in Italy in May 1945. And that's also important. How do you rebuild your lives when the storm is gone?
Yeah, my mother was born and raised in Salzburg, Austria.
Mm-hmm.
And when she was a little girl, her and her sister, when the Americans came into the area there, were so happy that the Americans came in. And, it was really, they didn't write books or anything. Of course, they were a lot younger than your mother, but they were extremely happy when the Americans came in through there.
And,
whole different world.
My mother was 21 when the war ended. And some of the stories I included in the book are things I found out only in 2004.
Well, I think we've pretty much wrapped that up. So,
yes.
Silvano, we thank you so much for being here with us today and opening up to us. And I'm sure our listeners appreciate this too. So again, this is Michael T., and I thank you for being with us this morning. To all our listeners, I would invite you to go to bookpartypodcast.com. That's bookpartypodcast.com. Hit that subscribe tab on top, then scroll down to the icon of your choice, where you can find us on one of your favorite platforms, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or Audacity, where you can download and follow us there. And please don't forget to sign up for our newsletter to get the latest information on our upcoming shows. Book Party Podcast is owned and powered by MTM Legacy Publishing, LLC. This is Michael T., and we're powering off.
You must not miss our next episode as we delve into a world of inspiration, entertainment, and thought-provoking insights. Join Michael T. on the next Book Party Podcast and experience a new adventure, a new story, and a complete immersion into the world of Pages Unveiled, Chronicles of the Writing Journey.